Here is the Crescendo Music Education Podcast, episode 112. This podcast is being recorded on the lands of the Turrbal people. I acknowledge them as the traditional owners of the land and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. They were the first music makers on this land. Welcome to this episode of the Crescendo Music Education Podcast. I have a special guest, Carol Fox. She's a communication expert and she works in the sporting field mainly and with educators. I just love what she has to say about communication, and there's many similarities actually between sport and music, and we certainly agree passionately that children need music and physical development, obviously, like duh. But I think you're going to love this episode with Carol, and she has some really interesting thoughts that will help us with communication in our classroom, but also with others within our school and our school community. I will include the ways to contact her. I think we have a lot to learn from Carol. So I hope you enjoy this episode. And I would like to welcome to the Crescendo Music Education Podcast, Carol Fox. Hello, Carol.
Hi, Debbie, and thank you so much for having me. It's just a pleasure to be here.
Oh, a delight to have you. I first, only saw you at the Holt Summit. So that's the Hat and Lead Teacher Summit, and it was in Sydney this year, and you were the big presenter and you just spoke so well, and I learned so much from you, and I thought, no, my audience needs to hear from you.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you for saying. I do remember meeting you and some of your other people who were there. We had a bit of fun afterwards, didn't we?
Yes, it was fabulous. So I'm not sure if many of my music educator listeners know much about you. So I'm going to do this little bio, just a summary of your bio, actually, to give people a flavour of where you're coming from. And then we'll talk about perhaps, obviously, it's about communication, because that's what I took away from you. A few little tips and tricks to help us be better communicators. So here's a little brief bio. Carol Fox is a confident communication expert, executive coach and principal trainer with over 30 years of experience in elite sport performance and emergency services. She co-authored Confident Communication for Leaders and founded a correspondent. And there's the book. Oh, okay. Is it also an audio book?
No, because I haven't found someone who's got a lovely voice like all of your music teachers would have. But I have got it in ebook version. But yeah, it does need to be an audio book. Good question.
I do like audio books. However, probably worth getting a hard copy too. So I will do that after this. Oh, okay. We're back to the book. Communication for Leaders, and founded a corresponding program helping leaders eliminate self-doubt and achieve successful outcomes. Oh boy, we could do with that, couldn't we? Anyway, recognised as an Australian Financial Review 100 Women of Influence, Carol has guided prominent organisations including Australia Post, AFL clubs and McDonald's Australia. So you've worked with those people, goodness. As a former athlete and experienced board member, Carol combines her expertise in business and sport leadership to empower effective community-shaping action. And I know that's all focused around sport, but so many of those things resonated with me as a music educator. I think we've got a lot in common.
We have.
Yeah. So
and go. Yeah, I can't wait for your questions.
No, it's go. Well, before we move on from your bio, because I had to cut lots of things out.
I'm so sorry. I meant to send you a small version. I couldn't find it. And I said, you know what, Debbie, have the whole lot, you poor thing. So you had to work through that. But I did mention, everyone, look, I do have a sports background, but because of my background in sport, the people that it attracts in community sport, which I'm sure some of your members are in, means that we're very community minded. So it's meant that I've been able to work in government agencies where people do it. You know, we're not always doing it for the money. We're doing it to help the community. And then I did have a laugh when I was sending it to you to say, you would think that my two children would be very athletic and they've grown up around athletes, but no, both are very musically minded. So I didn't know what to do with that and still don't sometimes. So it's been this real interesting for me to have music in my family when my husband and I are very sports orientated, but then of course we found out grandfathers and everything else were all very musical. So um, it's always been a really interesting area for me to think
Mm.
about.
And it's important that kids have that music, even if they don't end up doing something with it in their career. It's
Mm.
just good, that cognitive development. And it's the same with sport. I mean, it really should not be music for the sake of sport or music against sport. I've found myself in many schools where they're almost like enemies. You know, we can't make a big thing of the music without denigrating sport or vice versa. And it really should,
Absolutely.
they should both exist.
And I think sometimes, like, and I was a school teacher for a short while, and so many of my friends are still teaching, love it. But I I know what I know now. We're very different people too. You know, music people are very, and I'm generalizing everyone, of course, and you know my communication styles, but much gentle, beautifully spoken, words really matter. Whereas we'll have our sports, our phys ed teachers, you know, we're all out there and we're in it. And again, I know I'm generalizing everyone, but we'll be louder and so sometimes there's judgment that sits in there too. And then yes, we are pitted against each other because depending on where we're based and the cultures in our schools, some cultures value music very highly and sport couldn't care less. And then there's other times it gets switched around. So I think that sometimes we're the poor cousins of all the other subjects when we're
Yes.
not taken seriously.
Yes, I think so. The fact that we're not reading and writing, you know, and arithmetic, the 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic, and what we offer is just as important to child development.
Oh, I mean, how many times we heard that music is great for our mind for mathematics?
Mm.
You know, how often have we heard that when we have a child who's active and physical, that it frees up their mind for even more learning? So,
Mm.
you know, we're talking to the converted here,
Yeah.
but I do understand, you know, the unique position that we are put in as music teachers and sports teachers in a school where sometimes we're not taken seriously. And yeah, it's not always it's not a good situation when that
No,
happens.
but I think it's makes it even more important that we need to be able to communicate to others the importance of what we do, which is the
Mm,
sort of bent I would like to take with
mm.
you for this podcast, is how we can do that. But before we get on to that, I like to ask all my guests about gratitude. So,
Right.
for what are you most grateful? I just think it's a good practice.
Oh, it's a beautiful practice and one that I do every day, I have to say. I'm going to be naughty and have two. So
Mhm.
I'm very grateful that I live and I live, work, play, and swim. I'm an ocean swimmer on the lands of the traditional lands of the Yugambeh language people here on the Gold Coast,
Mhm.
and just really acknowledge and appreciate um, just the richness of where I live. And then my other gratitude is that I get to do what I love every single day. So I have beautiful clients and just really get to help people, you know, be kind to themselves and others.
Wow, that's fabulous. Is most of your time spent working with individual clients or when I say individual clients, even if it's a company, So is that how you spend most of your day working with clients?
Yeah, it's very different, so I do one-on-one coaching and that varies. Sometimes it's me helping sports coaches or a CEO, or I've actually got some people in education I work with. And that's just one-on-one. It's all about getting people out of their own way. So, to be the best they can be and to enjoy their life. But and I think all of you will understand this, my bliss, my question is, what makes my heart sing is to stand in front of a group where we're learning about each other and acceptance and understanding and kindness. So that's probably where I spend a lot of my time teaching my concepts out of my book. And then when I also get opportunities to talk to a room full of people, like at our conference where there's hundreds of people there, and that's just sharing some little snippets with people that, hopefully they take something away and can use. But my heart sings when I've got a group of people I can really talk to and connect with, and as they understand what I'm talking about, for them to look around and go, I could probably have a more open mind.
Yes, yes, and you could see that happening actually in the group in Sydney in the summit. It is great to present to a large group, but then to get those feelings that they're with you and they're understanding, and you can see on the spot that almost that growth before your eyes. It's really
Mm.
exciting, isn't it?
And teachers, it lights us up. It lights me up,
Yeah.
and I just, and I'm sure many teachers, we do it for those moments where we look around the room and go, oh, thank you, you know.
Yeah. Yep. And you've got to do it for those moments because you don't do it for everything else. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. I mean,
No, you've got a hard gig, and that's why at the conference I made the point of starting off my keynote sharing what's happening on a worldwide basis. And here you were, frontline workers, never acknowledged. So police and nurses and doctors, everyone else was acknowledged, but our teachers, who not only were there frontline, but some of you also had your own family members sitting there with their schooling. And, it was a lot of hard work for people, and for many teachers to have to teach at a blank screen, where there was no feedback. It doesn't worry some people, but a lot of us it did. So I think part of that conference was, and part of what I talk about now is just acknowledging that, we went through a really tough time. Let's validate that. People are turning up differently. You will have
Mm.
all noticed. And if you remember, Debbie, I've shared the metaphor of the traffic light, where we used to go from green to amber to red. Now it's like amber's disappeared,
Yes.
and people are now going from green to red. Now, as teachers, you work not only with your colleagues and your students, but you also work with parents. And in sport, I tend to spend a lot of my time in community, grassroots level, talking about how to manage our very passionate parents.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing we've noticed is that they've got more passionate.
Yes.
And it means that we're not just managing ourselves post-pandemic, our colleagues and our students, but we're also getting people even outside of school that their emotions are much closer to the surface, and we need to find a space where we can support them, but also not take it on too.
Yes. Yes. One of the ways I think of it is, that ladder of inference, and they are just straight up to the top. Not all, of course. I don't mean that, but
No,
I do find more and more, and all of the people that I work with, is that parents can be more difficult to work with because it's just straight away, like you said, I like that, no amber light. It's just
there's
straight
no
from all
amber.
is good and oh my goodness, why are you doing this to my child? Oh, hold on. And there seems to be no filter anymore between the keyboard and what arrives in
I
your
know.
inbox. People
No.
put it in your drafts for a little while and have a look at it the next day. You know?
Yeah, a bit of email etiquette won't go astray. And you know, again, words matter. So I'm going to make an assumption that if you're a music teacher, and many of your listeners are, that you will all have what we call an auditory preference. It has to, otherwise you'll be tone deaf like me.
Yes, we've
So
at least partly auditory preference.
you would
Yes.
have to be able to teach, because me teaching music, it's not going to happen. So what that means is that words really matter. I know words matter to everyone, but particularly to an auditory communicator. So when someone says something and you hear tone that other people don't hear, words matter. So if you get a nasty email, those words can cut. It's a nasty way. And it when we look at communication preferences, only 20% of the population have auditory as a first preference. And if you think about that, then at school and your music, and you do have that as your preference, maybe English literature teachers might have it as well, because words really matter, that the other communication styles are walking around not aware of the impact that their words can have on you. Now, you'll know if you're auditory because you correct people, or you've learnt not to correct them because people get.
You've learnt to hold your tongue when you want to correct them. Yes.
And the reason is, so I'm what we call a high visual. So for me, I'm just totally focused on the outcome. And Debbie, if you're there and I'm walking past your office and I'm on my way somewhere and I go, Debbie, I hope you had a great day. And you're like, whoa, what just happened there? So, you know, if you look around, it's one of the reasons I love working in schools, is because I can often spot, oh yeah, that's a phys ed staff, and that's the music staff, and there's our English staff, and there's a physics department, the mathematics. Now, again, everyone, I know I'm generalizing, and I never generalize to box people in, just more to have a smile on my face and go, wow, we are all so different. And then they say, go play nicely together in the sandbox, everyone.
Yes. Yes, and consider everyone's individual differences at the same time.
Yeah. And as teachers, you know this, all of you, because it's why you use PowerPoints and whiteboards and everything else, because we know that in a classroom, approximately 40% of them are visual learners, meaning they have to see what you're talking about. So in music, that's really interesting for me, because it might be I would need to see the notes, but it would nearly be, if you're going to get me to listen to a piece of music, if you had color therapy that matched it, you'd really engage me. Your kinesthetics really need to feel the music, so they'll get emotional when you play this beautiful piece of music. Yes. Or they'll shut down, depending on, you know, what it does. Of course, your auditory communicators, when they learn music, they learn it by hearing. They remember all the words to a song. And often their friends will go, how do you know all those words? And I'm like, I don't know, I just remember it. And then data digital are the other communication style, and they're about 10% of the population. So they'll often get picked on at school because they're different to everyone else. And that's because they love details and data. So then we'll find anywhere where they're into statistics and mathematics and again, I don't know enough about music, but there's definitely an aspect to music that is very logical, depending on what it is. So you would probably find some of those students, and they're the ones that often get called the geeks and the nerds. Yes. And yeah, and
I'm
it's because
I've got a specific little group in mind that I taught recently, and they actually label, it's all right because I'm not using names here, they actually call themselves the super nerds, right?
No,
and they just fit your description exactly, and they're very musical in a very specific, precise way. Yeah. You can see that. But that was interesting, listening to your talk about the communication styles, and I hadn't thought about data digital as the style. I mean, most of us have, of course, auditory and visual and kinesthetic, and I think that certainly it's an aspect of the way that I teach and the way that I develop things in my classroom and in my professional learning for other teachers. Is I think it's important that we use a whole lot of different approaches. I use a lot of manipulatives and make sure that you do cover the different learning styles, because everybody is different. And even if they have a real preference for one style or one or two, you don't know what they are, how they're operating at that day, on that day, in that context, with that material. So I figure you cover all your bases and you practice your known repertoire in a whole lot of different ways, and then everyone will have their pennies drop at different times. And
Mm-hmm.
uh, so that was very awkwardly described, but I think you know what I
No,
mean.
it was perfect. And the thing about our kinesthetic learners, right, they're our feelers. So they'll be the ones. So again, I'm assuming I've never taught music, but they'll be the ones that'll, well, if you're showing them an instrument, they have to touch it.
I've got to
And then
touch
you
it.
go,
Yep.
get your hands off it. Not yet. And they're like, so they won't learn until they actually do.
Do that's
And
right.
often our kinesthetic learners, because some of you probably have to take other subjects as well, they will often tell me they're slow learners. And my answer to that is that they actually process at a much deeper level. So when they're sitting there and they are taking everything in and checking in how they feel, you might have other communication styles answering your questions. Your kinesthetics will be very quiet, but 2 days later, that is embodied. They have learnt that lesson very, very deeply. And that's why I always love reframing, particularly in adult learning. When someone says I'm a slow learner, I go, what if you're actually just learning at a deeper level? And again, for a lot of you teaching music, not only is it possible that you will attract your auditory communicators, but you'll also attract our feelers as well. So have you noticed you're probably attracting some very sensitive souls to your classrooms,
Mm-hmm.
the ones that do the extracurricular work. So they're very, very sensitive, because not only if they've got that combination, not only are they really sensitive to what they're hearing and words hurt, but they also feel everything as well. So it's a very sensitive combination of communication styles to have. And that's when they can get bullied pretty easily, because they'll, as a feeler, they can go into their emotions really quickly as well. So sometimes the music room or the band or, um, um, all of the different extracurricular activities you're forming for these people actually gives them a really safe place to be.
Yes, I agree. And I think the music classroom, of course, home base, and everyone in primary school, that's where I call it the beating heart of the school.
Aw.
But that's where you do see, I think that's where we have to be very good at our job when we play. If we're playing a little responding piece, a listening piece before we do the game and do the, I do about 7 or 8 different activities in a half-hour lesson. But if it's a listening thing, there are some children that will just literally start to cry. And you go, what's wrong? That reminds me of my grandma, who's, and you just go,
Yeah,
and it's so great that they feel safe enough um,
to do it.
to
It's
tell
so
us and feel.
beautiful.
You've got to handle those things all the time. I sometimes feel like we're magicians or jugglers, as you get these 25 to 30 kids at a time, 30 minutes at
Mm,
a time, with everything that comes with those individuals. Whereas a
mm,
classroom teacher, you have that same set of kids basically in a primary school, and you can get to know
mm.
them. It's very difficult for us to have to help each child feel heard and seen, and hopefully help them learn all in this short period of time.
And
So,
I agree. And that's where just having that awareness that today, what am I going to show them? how do I want them to feel? What will they hear? And have I got some information that I do need to give the ones that need a bit more info because it's got to make sense? And if you can cater for that, but I think most importantly, Debbie, I've done I was a lecturer at uni. Once I finished, I did secondary school as a teacher, but I've used music the whole time. And so when people walk into a workshop, I've got music playing, and it's chosen specifically, and it's not classical music, everyone, because we all know classical music's very good. The cadence helps the brains. No, it's just boppy music when I want them to be boppy. If I give them an exercise to do and it's a sad exercise, that sadder music comes on and gets people a bit emotional. And then we come out of that and do a daggy dance to some silly music. And, I think that I remember at uni when I was using, as a university lecturer, using music, all the other lecturers were looking at me going, "What are you doing in your room?" And I said, "I'm setting the scene. When they walk through that door, they know they're up for an adventure." Because I would have fun music and they'd all be going, yeah, 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 and they'd be ready to learn. So I think when we're running music classes, how exciting for you that you get to decide, hey, what are we looking at today, and what music's going to bring them in, and what a beautiful way. Also, how important, and even now more than ever, being present. And we talk about meditation and breathing. What a respite music can be for people when they get in there and you say, here's the nice music, take your breath, let's get grounded. And then they might get a little bit emotional because at lunchtime someone pulled their hair or called them a name. And then that's the moment with that beautiful music. Take a breath, everyone, lower your gaze. You are safe. Like, that's the power of your room when they come to see you. Whereas, interesting, back in the day when I was a phys ed teacher, it was like, right, everyone, let's go. Like,
Once around the oval.
Yeah. Oh, particularly, yeah. Young boys in springtime, yes, round the oval.
Around the oval.
A couple of times.
And it's a good reminder for us, you saying that, because we do. Okay, I'm sweeping generalization again on my part this time. There's so much that we want to do, so much we want to get through, so much we want to teach. And we know there's a public holiday next week, so we won't see the grade fives next week. So I've got to do this and I've got to, and we tend to go instead of going, hold on, what is important here? Let's just take a moment. And we have that power of music in the palm of our hand. So why not just slow down a bit, take stock, and think about what's best for those little people, which could be today just about belonging and being part of this group.
Yeah.
They might not care that they can't hear 4 even sounds on a beat, which will be a ticker ticker. Like, they might not care about that. They might just need to feel valued. So I think we can't forget that that's within our scope as well.
In your power, how beautiful that. Yes, I know you, and they're not called KPIs, but yes, you'll have certain things that you must get through on your curriculum. But think about this, we as facilitators, really, we need to read the room. And there's just going to be days when they come in and there's been something awful's happened, or it's windy. We all know what they're like on a windy day. Windy day, give up, everyone. Just get them to sit there and take some deep breaths, or run around the oval or whatever else while they're, I don't know, playing something. But read the room, and that you'll have days when you'll be able to get stuck into it. And there's other days where hands go up in the air and you go, you know what, everyone, close your eyes or lower your gaze, and I hope it's okay, but we're just going to do some deep breathing and listen to some nice music. As I said, I really feel like it's a bit of a respite for people.
Yes.
For
And
little people.
especially in our data-driven society, to have that nice little bit, that little special time in the music room, it's really important.
Well, for some of them, it's the only time really they're listening to music that's nurturing, and because some of the times if they're online, they're hearing some pretty awful stuff. So
So it is really absolutely vital. And I think that what we do in the music classroom, and I'm talking the primary music classroom especially, but of course it does go for secondary music. Um, and I've talked a lot in the past, even about things like using their names. We'll play a name game, and everyone has their name said or sung in a beautiful way, and we've made eye contact, and they feel special. And it could be the only time that day that their name has been used in a kind way. And I know we're all teaching in different contexts. I'm very privileged to be in a fairly lovely school with fairly good context, but I've also had to earn the feel of that music room as well. But
mm,
kids are coming with all sorts of backgrounds, and maybe having their hands held in a circle during a game
mm,
or doing a hand clapping game is
mm,
is the only positive touch they will have. And
absolutely.
all of those things are so special in our music
And
room.
you cover them in your music room, so not only do you see someone, and then because also visuals are love to perform.
Mm,
So they might not sound too good if they're like me and tone deaf, but they do like to be seen and perform. So you get to see them. You definitely hear, because this is where your auditory communicators shine. Your kinesthetics are touching musical instruments, but as you said, a hand clap,
amazing.
and your data digital communicators, the little nerds, what are they called? Super nerds. They're
Super
sitting there
nerds.
going, oh, I wonder why the music looks like that this time, or no, you got the cadence wrong, or
Hmm.
whatever else it is. And it validates their experience of the world too.
Yeah.
So I think it's a really special place, and that understanding, but also understanding why some people, they won't like being in the music room because it's not what they're good at. They much prefer to be learning something else, because music can come across as a little bit difficult sometimes,
Hmm.
particularly if they're relying on hearing.
Yes, yes. And yeah, catering for those kids too, because sometimes there's that little person that, when we're about to do something a little bit noisy, and you can go up and say, we're about to do this. Would you like to just go outside while we do that? And I'll come back in. Yes, please. So
Oh,
it's,
that's beautiful.
getting to know
Yeah.
those individuals. It just takes a while though. But
But
since,
that's our neurodiversity. We weren't talking about neurodiversity seriously.
no,
Uh, we'd roll our eye. I don't know what you were like, but you'd roll your eyes and go, "Oh, ADHD," which of course was all the boys. They forgot to diagnose all the girls because they didn't have that hyperactivity. So now in your classroom, as many of you know, your parent comes up and says, "My child's special. They've got ADHD or ADD, or they're some autism, and it's all the whole spectrum that we're now also dealing with as teachers." And again, this is why what you've just said there, Debbie, is so precious, to know that there's a child there who doesn't like noise, and noise really unsettles them, to be able to say, hey, here's some headphones,
yes.
or just pop out. Can you go and pop out and go see that teacher for me and send a message, or whatever it is? Just shows how respectful you are of them. And that's where you would have noticed with the communication styles when I was teaching them, you could actually see variations of some of our neurodiversity and how it works in there too.
Yes, yes, when you look at the different styles, it's almost, I don't know if this is the correct way to look at it, but I could almost see them in my head on a continuum. And
Yes,
on some of those, right at an extreme of one of those styles, is
mhm,
probably got a label.
absolutely. Yep, you are spot on. I work with Sport Inclusion Australia, where I work with athletes with mental impairment, and very interesting, all the different styles. And when I teach communication styles, it actually normalizes them, because
Mm-hmm.
they sit there and go, are there other people like me, but they're not autistic, or they're not high functioning autism or ADHD? And I go, yeah, like me, if I'm under stress, this is how I'll come across. And then one of the young ones recently went, oh, that's me. And I went, yeah. So I think that, I know I spoke at a teachers conference last week, and a lot of them were starting to go, oh, how do we remember all this, and how do we know? And I'm like, you already know. Just create a space where I don't have to know what your preference is, but I do need to know that you are all turning up differently. And sometimes you need to ask too, So I actually went to a school that was prided its on music. So it was called Mac Robertson Girls Secondary, and down in Victoria. And back in the day, it was very much a musical school. So me being an athlete, I kind of was very much a fish out of water. And I just wish at one point someone had have said to me, what do you need to be engaged in this classroom? Because I couldn't hear. It's not what I was trained in. So I couldn't hear anything. I couldn't hear the difference. And we did have a Russian music teacher. She was very, very strict. And all I remember is we had the choir. And you've got to remember, we were a beautiful, this was a school of excellence in music. And we had this choir, and I always remember she said, all right, girls, we're going to practice up, get started. And she stopped the whole class and she would, what is that terrible noise? Carol, no more. You just do, no more singing, no more sound. It's hilarious. Now, I was rebellious then, so I didn't mind that I got told not to sing. But, it was,
Oh,
and I think that's what you're talking before about our purpose, right?
yeah.
I mean, yes, her purpose was to produce a choir that was representative of our school and a school of excellence. But maybe there was also a purpose to make everyone feel included too.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
this was a really long time ago, everyone. I think some of us can remember our school days, and
Yeah.
they probably weren't as inclusive as they are now.
But I would say, I mean, obviously different horses for different courses, but to me, the feeling of belonging and inclusion is much more important than having the best choir in the world. And we have gorgeous choirs at our school, but they're inclusive, because that's more important. But that's, like you said, different horses for different courses, as I said. And so we won't cast any nasturtiums on anyone. As we know, laughter relieves stress. Don't lose sight of the funny side of life. Okay, what starts with a T, ends with a T, and has tea in it? Well, of course, it's a teapot. Oh, that was a cute one. Thank you so much for watching our Crescendo Music Education podcast. For more information about all things Crescendo, including membership and music education resources, visit us at crescendo.com.au. Don't forget to like and subscribe.